this time. This one has an AK bank because that's how it used to work. So this is just pretty much the old way of doing it. And maybe just showcasing that there is a checkbox. We might probably just need to refresh it. And should play our sound that is in our user bank. So that's pretty much all there is to it for the gems demo. So this is really the simple or the basic way to use Audiobanks. And now I'll be switching to a more interesting one. I have a demo in the Wwise Adventure game. So I'll just switch to it. And the idea behind the adventure game demo is to showcase how you can go from a user bank only project to and change your existing bank into Audiobanks and still be able to use them and use the Audiobank feature. So for the demo, I will be showcasing it with the footstep event. I'll just make it super loud so we can hear it well. And what I will do is create an Audiobanks work unit. This is not a necessary step. It's just for this project, there's an all-in-one SoundBanks that takes all the work unit that exists. So I just created one, moved it there, so it's not in it. And there's only the general SoundBank that refers to the footstep event directly. And now I will just generate it all. And as you can see,
let's pause here for just a second. I want to unpack the auto-defined SoundBanks piece of this for folks and slow it down just a notch. So we're taking the Wwise Adventure Game project, which has a series of user-defined SoundBanks up in the top part of this SoundBank Manager window. So these are the SoundBanks that have been created as part of the Wwise Adventure game. And what you're doing is you've created a new event that
it's an existing one. That was the footstep one that I moved into another work unit. The reason I did that is we have this user bank that simply takes all the existing work units. So I just moved it there so it's excluded. Gotcha. And basically the idea is just to make it an auto bank.
Great. So and now, now we see the player footstep bank that is an event bank. So it's the event, it's structures, it's game syncs, and the media then for those auto-defined SoundBanks is created outside of the BNK format as a WEM file. Cool. Okay. Which is, again, just drawing the line between the user-defined banks that have existed in the project and then the auto-defined SoundBanks and how those are different. And again, auto-defined really just means that it's looking at the event, it's looking at the sounds that event needs, and then it's creating a bank of the behaviors and how to play that sound alongside its media or those compressed WEM files. Cool. Okay. Continue. Thanks for slowing down with me.
Thanks for doing that. So yeah, I'll be, now that I've generated them, I'll simply be going into my Unity project, and my footstep event is here. It's not a user-defined SoundBank anymore. And you should hear the really loud steps since I increase the sound. And that's really all there is to it to Audiobanks. Once you've generated them, you just don't need the AK bank component anymore. And you simply make sure that this is unchecked. And that's pretty much it.
Great. And so on the Unity side, just connecting the dots for people. So you've created this player footstep auto-defined SoundBank that it has an association with that object. So now anytime that object is loaded in Unity, it's going to bring along that auto-defined sound bank with it. So it's going to automatically load and unload that as the game, either has the associated game object loaded or unloaded. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and that's basically what the AK bank component used to do when you were using the user-defined bank, but now it's all done into the event itself.
Yeah, and that whole concept, right, has been at the core of efforts that we've been making over the last releases towards just coming up with an asset management strategy that relies on the game to load and unload that without having to manually make those decisions explicitly. It instead takes what the game already knows about what it needs and dynamically loads and unloads only what it needs when it needs it. And I think that this breakthrough in auto-defined sound banks is, now available as part of Unity, which for us completes the whole circle of, having it available for folks out there with proprietary engines, Unreal when it arrived in 22.1, and now in Unity for 24.1. So it's a full picture of automation for asset management. So thanks for stepping through that. But it gets better, doesn't it?
Yeah, but there's also another thing I want to showcase before, which is simply now all I've done is just move an event outside of the of its old sound bank, but we can also just delete sound banks and makes everything inside AutoBank. And that's something you can do. I will be using the dungeon sound bank as an example, but it has a bunch of sound bank and also to be deleting it. And
Okay.
the thing with the whatever was included, this is because of how the Wise adventure game is made. It is also included in the all-in-one banks because, as I've said, it just takes everything here. So I'll simply be taking all the dungeon stuff and moving it to my work unit that is excluded by that. And if I generate it all, it should simply show here as they're all auto banks now, except this one because it's in the quest. Doing this, I'm not sure how many user will do that to complete like if it was working in user bank, there's no reason for you to necessarily go into AutoBank unless you want to use it, but it's just to showcase that you can do that. There's just the some caveat where it's a bit dangerous to do that in case if you forget something, it will make like you need to know what was included in that sound bank and make sure everything is now auto-defined sound bank. Otherwise, it will fail, which is something I do want to showcase here. So if you see here, your bank load failed because you deleted the bank, and also the ambient region dungeon, which is this one that I forgot to move, that will fail also to play. So you need to like be careful with it. It will help you. You will get logs and you will get prompted to go, but it is something that you need to keep searching. So it is a possibility. If you do it properly, it will work. It's just that you just need to be careful. Like in this case, you would need to go back into the scene here that included your AK bank component. That is the dungeon bank. Just make sure you remove it. And you would need also to go into your Wise project, which I will go back to. And just make sure you move it into your bank and make it auto bank.
Yeah.
So if you go here, it is now auto bank. So if you go back into your project, which is this one, and you go back to your main scene. Go back to the area. And as you can see, your error are gone, but it is still something that you need to be careful of when you switch to autobanks. Like you need to make sure that everything becomes autobank or everything that was in the bank is now autobank. Otherwise, it won't be able to load. And also just make sure that your AKBank component is now gone because, well, you've deleted it twice. So yeah.
Right.
So that's
so that process of having an already established game, making the switch to auto-defined sound banks, and there's some checkboxes that you need to make sure you're doing in order to make that transition seamlessly and have everything persist the way you expect it.
the checkbox. Those will be checked automatically.
Okay.
By whenever you regenerate the sound bank. So this one, for example,
okay,
we'll just make sure I'm on the right project. Let me just close these.
Great. And ideally, people are adopting an auto-defined sound bank strategy from the start of their project or near the start.
That's the ideal. But since we're introducing in 24.1, it does make sense to not have it set. And it is a possibility to go back.
Great.
So yeah, I could showcase the checkbox that you mentioned. So this one I manually checked it. This is false since we've set it up here.
Yep.
As a autobank. So if we go in, that's already wrong. It will simply not work. But if you generate your bank, this will be refreshed and so it will check it for you, and we'll do that for all the banks in your project.
Okay, great.
It could add a little bit of load time while it basically parses through our new addition that's called project database, and it will go through and check for if the bank is a user bank on AutoBank, which can add a little bit, and that happens every time you generate the SoundBanks.
Great. So in this case, if I just again slow this down, you've got the footstep, player footstep, which is an event attached to this player object. Mm-hmm. And when you generate the sound banks, there's a comparison between what Unity knows about the event and what Wwise has generated over on its side. So as we have generated a auto-defined sound bank, it compares it to this setting for is user defined over in Unity and just automatically removes that association to the user defined bank.
Yeah. Yes.
Smart.
And there was a question at some point of why we have the checkbox to begin with. If it's done in the background and there's not much to do on your end, it is something that we could remove. It was done through development because at first the automatically association was not planned to be done without addressables, which is the last thing I have to talk about.
Okay, cool. Let's take it one level deeper and talk about addressables. Remind me how addressables work in the context of Unity. Why are people reaching for addressables in the first place for all of their content management? What purpose does it serve?
Let me just switch to my addressable project so I can show it better. So whenever you work in addressables, it will create assets for our bank and our web now. Those will be addressable assets that we can put in groups. And those groups can be addressed. Basically, that's how addressable works. And I think the best use case for those is probably for making DLCs, where you can simply have everything on your banks or your web for a specific DLC into a group. By default, we only create them for your platforms, but those will be put inside. You could change them and create one for your DLC one and simply load them when you're in your DLCs. And I think that's probably the best use for addressables.
Great. Okay.
So yeah, I've already done the addressable installation, which is this hasn't changed. It is in our documentation online. And all there's missing is the window bank that I've purposely deleted. So I'll just need to go into my addressable project, Wwise project. And so yeah, all I have to do is just generate them and it will create all my addressables assets for me. So there you go.
Great.
And I think this worked exactly how addressable used to work in the prior releases. The only thing I have to mention is now our addressable assets have the same idea of knowing by themselves if they're autobanks or not. So autobanks is also supported with when working with addressables. So as you can see, this cave is just a regular bank that is in the here in our region. So that one is a user bank. It won't have it, but our play footstep, I did the same thing in this addressable project. So I moved away my play footstep that is now in this autobank section. So if you go here, you can see the player footstep is an autobank, and the system will know that it is autobank, so it will work just fine.
Great. And it's that addressable grouping that we're looking at for that object that helps to define where it gets put. Cool.
And I think that's pretty much all I have to show. The only last addition, which is not necessarily related to Autobank, that has been done with the addressable package, is this reload all scene button. It is just to basically it does what it says, it reload all the scene. It's just that in addressable, there's an init bank holder that needs to be set. And that's only set when you load your scene. So we just added that to just load all of them and just set the init bank holder for you. And so it just goes through all your scene and puts it just so you can build your project without having to go through them one by one.
Great. And help me out here. Other addressable configurations, like something like an initial download bank. This would be something that you could define as an addressable and group certain events into that if there was something you wanted to download at the start of a game, let's say.
Yeah, you could create your new group. I haven't done that in a little while since I've mostly worked into in regular groups, but you could create a new group for sure. So probably remove it to initial load.
Great.
And then you just select basically whatever you want to put in there. So let's say we want to put maybe quest 1.
Sure, yeah.
And title screen. The UI is not the best.
Yeah.
Maybe something like this to the top. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, just move it here. And then
way to work that UI. Yeah.
And yeah, so those will be loaded when you call this one instead of the Windows one.
Perfect. So, a total common scenario where you want that initial download to land as quickly as possible and get people set up with sound, while then you bring in more data while people are playing. Again, giving you that ability to set these up in whatever way suits your game or installation, whether it's DLC, initial downloads, or any other configuration of assets that you need. Addressables would be that mechanism that Unity provides for that. So yeah, nice, thanks.
And yeah, that's pretty much what I have for my demo. So
okay. Well, thanks for stepping us through that. I think a lot of great work goes into arriving at that kind of simplicity where people have the tools to automatically get their assets loaded and unloaded in a way that makes sense for their game. not to mention that second piece of putting them into addressables, segmenting them in a way that gives them that flexibility to deliver them as part of their game installation or experience. So tremendous work. Thanks for taking us through that. Folks out there, if you have questions about Unity, auto-defined SoundBanks, or addressables, drop them in the chat. We'll weave them into the conversation. It's a gift to have the experience of Hugo and Michel here with us today. So yeah, drop us a question into the chat and we'll try to answer them as soon as we can. And meanwhile, Michel, I'm looking at you. How are you feeling about stepping into the world of Unreal, auto-defined SoundBanks, and packaging?
Oh, that will be awesome because we've been working on this for a long time. And it's funny because these are the kind of things that should work seamlessly. And I hope to be doing the longest Was Up on Air live stream about 2 checkboxes. One that was actually added in 22.1 and that is now available in Unity, and one that we just added in the Wise packaging part of your Unreal project, and that should do all of the work itself. So it's simply 2 checkboxes. It's really, really funny.
We'll see how long we can take. I've swapped over to your demo, and should we do it in slow motion? Are we clicking in slow motion here?
I guess so. So let's start. Okay.
But give me the high level here for a second, because of course, auto-defined SoundBanks and Unreal has been there since 22.1. We're just bringing it to Unity, but folks out there are using it. We've been evolving with their use of it. And this next step is towards packaging. And so give us an outline of packaging and how that, do we think about it in the same terms as addressables?
Yeah, exactly. It's the first, actually, the new feature that we just added, the Wise packaging, the checkbox here, package as bulk data, is pretty much our equivalent of addressables. It adds a new feature that will add functionalities similar to addressables, addressable groups. Like you've just seen Hugo actually creating a group. It's the same thing for us. So right now I'm cooking content without the packaging as bulk data so that we can actually see how it fares. Of course, I close my window. So I will have to find this eventually someplace. It's far. We have so many subfolders in this. I'm sorry, I closed my window. I always close my window because the real estate is so tiny at that resolution.
You did say we were trying to make this the longest 2 checkbox demo ever, and I think this is
I needed to wait for the cooking to actually be done, so that's the excuse,
Okay, nice.
So if I go to Jim's content, and in here we have what got saved for the cooking part of the gyms, and if I go to Wise Audio, we see that we have the init bank, and we see that we have media here, that this is the same than generated SoundBanks. So when you create the generated SoundBanks, it will populate those folders. But this is what got packaged while we were doing the cook. So in the cooking phase of Unreal here, when you do cook content, it will create a copy of everything. And these are the files that are used inside the GEMS project. And this is what has been used for for 22.1 and 23.1. So you see all the bank files here.
Great.
And you have the different languages, of course. This works well to a certain point. The problem is those files are actually packaged inside the pack file or are packaged outside as individual files, and these are actually long to load because there are many small files. You've seen auto-defined sound bank. They will create small bank for every single event, so these are tiny.
It's a great way to keep your assets optimized because you're only loading these small pieces that you need instead of more monolithic sound banks of
history. Exactly. But then if you have something, I will give you one large example, and this is the place where I will actually take my time. Let's pretend that you have the play footstep. Play footstep is normally you have something like that. You have only one play footstep. You will play a footstep for if it's a mob, if it's a monster, if it's a human, if it's whatever you have, it will play a footstep. If you are 100 characters in the same screen, every single character will play a footstep. But those footsteps can be actually complex. So if you start with a version from games from the 80s, every footsteps were exactly the same. It's very simple. You play the event play footstep, it will play, well, let's say that sound in here.
Yeah.
And that's cool. But eventually people grew tired of that, and you want to have actually more stuff to do, and you want to have some creativity in there. So you will say, hey, I have a random container and I have those sounds that will be play footsteps. So then you have some creativity. You will even add a new plugin if you want. For example, the impact plugin, and you will actually have split all of those between two parts, or you will create new sounds or anything. And the Strata collection is actually quite good to have a lot of variety with this, and you can add more variety. So you can have, well, let's say 10 sounds for your play footstep. That's only your footstep for your character, assuming it has shoes, assuming you have normal ground. Now, let's say you have multiple grounds. You have soil, you have concrete, you have random kind of ground.
Sand,
then you have
and water and all kinds
exactly.
of stuff.
But then you can also have percentages of water. So maybe there's only a little bit of water and you need small splashes or big splashes, or you are directly into a river or something, then you need multiple of them. So you will have RTPC curves going all around and everything, but you need those sounds. So you will have hundreds of sound with this, but this is only one kind of shoe. Maybe you have a metallic shoe, and then metallic shoe will sound differently. Well, it will sound pretty much the same on sand, I guess. But if you go on concrete, it will sound totally different. So then you have hundreds and hundreds of sounds because you want 10 variations for every kind. So then you have tiny shoes or no shoes. For example, maybe you have a dog or a cat. You still want to hear those, maybe, especially if they run quickly or if they skid or if they do. I mean, you see how it goes. So it goes really, really far.
It's a footstep masterclass, really, Michel. And ultimately, I don't think we want to load all of those surfaces,
exactly,
all of those animals and character types. We don't want to load all of those footstep sounds at the same time.
Precisely. So you have maybe 5,000 sounds in your play footsteps that will be used depending on when, how, what level you have, if you are in a city or in a forest. So you need to load those depending on where and what you are doing. So these actually add up. And if you had all of them inside one sound bank, instead of having individual SoundBanks, then or individual media like this, then you need to load megabytes and megabytes and megabytes worth of sounds in one SoundBank because you need to play a footstep, but we are not there anymore. So we need to dynamically load individual files. This is why auto-defined SoundBank is there. But the problem with this, if you have 5,000 files, you need to open 5,000 files, read 5,000 files, close 5,000 files. And this takes a lot of time. We're stuck with it. We need to do it, but we cannot do that. And this is where the history actually comes back to haunt us, because we used to have in 19.2 something that we called event-based packaging. And that was actually packaging things inside the different U assets of Unreal and load only what was needed. And that's usually good, but then you have a lot of U assets. So if you have 50,000 sounds in your game, because games are getting hard on the audio these days, if you have 5,000 sounds only for your play footstep, you're bound to have at least 50,000 audio files. So you need to have 50,000 U assets that need to be loaded. And those take a lot of time, a little bit less time than actually loading individual file. And this is the part that we actually screwed up a little bit for 22.1 and 23.1. I cannot say screw up actually, because we need to learn on those. And we used one feature that's called additional file cooking from Unreal, but they are using it in one place to load fonts and to load a particular subset of fonts. So of course, when we come to them and say, hey, by the way, our game is slow and we should have that inside your different files and optimize those for pack files and maybe get them in IO store, that will be really cool. They only use in one place. So we are far below in their priority. I prefer Unreal to actually have the best subset of features and create the best games ever, and us being left out. I'm sorry for myself, but that's pretty much what happens. So for 24.1, we decided to do something a little bit different. And we've been working on this since we understood that we will not have priority on this. And it's package as bulk data. You press this, it adds a new line of libraries used for cooking. Let's ignore that for now. Let's close it. It's not there. It doesn't exist. So now if we cook the content in here, and I'll just have to wait for the content to be cooked, it's slow. I'm sorry, that's life. Then what will happen is we already have in here, we have in the Wwise Audio, we have a folder named events, default work unit, AK ambient. These you can put whatever you want, wherever you want. You can change the name. You can do whatever you want with this. But by default, we are doing this. So if you create a new event, typically by going into the Wwise browser and actually drag and dropping it, or in your level, or adding the new event in your game or in a folder, it will put it there. This is where it will add it. It will add the same structure than in Wwise, but this is not automatic like it used to be. So you have an ambient event here, and this is an event. If you look at the data size, it says it's 1.7K. Why is that? It's because it doesn't contain anything anymore. It used to contain many things during the 19.2 and 21.1 era, but now what it contains is only the event info. So it contains the switch container loading, what we actually said, load media only when referenced, meaning we load only what is being used in the level. Then it contains a GUID, a short ID, and a name. And we use that inside the editor to actually tell what needs to be packaged. That has not changed since 22.1. That is still the same. And the only thing here I did was doing package as bulk data. People knowing about bulk data know where this is going. If I go to Wise Audio, you see that I don't have the bank here anymore. I don't have the event folder anymore. And if I go to the media folder, I only have a few media. Oh, that's good. So where are those files now? If I go to events and I go to the default work unit, AK ambient, I will see that I have a small UXP of a few bytes. If I go to large media here, I see that I have a small media UXP of a few bytes. If I go to localized, I have the same thing. So I have multiple small files, and all the assets have been packaged inside those directly. These are really small because we are reusing all the media most of the time. But technically, instead of having the banks inside the event folder with the tiny 1 kilobyte file that needs to be loaded, it's now packaged inside the events here. It's now packaged inside the different assets. But here we have a huge Wise shared asset library that seems to contain everything. What is that? Let's open this up. Let's open this here. Okay, this is a shared asset library. This is the equivalent of addressables groups. Right now, it contains every single thing. All the SoundBanks, the init bank, all the media files are in there. I will add a small filter in here saying I want to have something else. Now, it will only have the assets that are being shared between the different events. So if I go to my project, if I can, I will just move this here, sorry. I know you don't see that, but I was not able to press the button here because I had a HUD on top of it. That's really useful. So now it will actually have a filter inside my shared asset library. In my shared asset library, instead of being that big, we will propagate the different events and the different elements in there. So let's see how it fares when we load that. Unreal is slow to actually cook, so
working really hard.
Oh yeah, it's working really hard. And since I'm not using 5.5, I have not installed the incremental cooking. By the way, if just one tidbit, if you want to use incremental cooking, please at least use Unreal 5.4. Don't use it before, because they added a filter saying this doesn't support incremental cooking. You need to add it by manually, but in Unreal 5.5, unless they change it, because it's right now it's in beta, it's in developer actually. Then it's nothing in there is every single asset can decide whether it wants to package, how it wants to package, and it has something changed so far. So in here we have the init bank is now 2 kilobytes. So you see the init bank just got moved from the shared library to the init bank.
Yep.
So this happens for every single element in the everywhere. So sequencer specialized, you see now it contains that element. So whenever we want to load that event, the play sequencer specialized, you load the U asset, it will load all of its data directly in there. If it's to be streamed, it will not load it. It will just say, I'm keeping it for later on, but we know it's there. So it's actually packaging things sequentially in there. So it goes way faster, especially if you have a lot of media. But what are those shared assets? Let me give you one example. Let's say you are in user bank and you decided to create, like in a Wise Adventure game, you create one huge bank that contains everything. That bank contains hundreds of events. We need to copy that bank inside the event file for the U asset. So if it's 1 gigabyte, play sequencer specialized will be 1 gigabyte because we need to copy the file here. Play sequencer plain will also be 1 gigabyte because we also need the event in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you rinse and repeat this for every single event. So every event will be 1 gigabyte because we actually have 1 gigabyte file inside of there. That's not what we want, of course. If you have big media or small media, sometimes it's all right to actually have no media at all, actually saying, hey, my large media event is shared with something else. So let's go here and say, oh, large media file is actually a shared file. This is the Wise shared asset library. So we remove all the assets that are uniquely used, and we keep the shared assets only. Those assets, those media files, or if you had a user bank, that user bank is shared across multiple events. We cannot package it individually inside the events. So we created something that's called a Wise Asset Library. And the Wise Asset Library is actually a repository of multiple Wise assets, whether it's the init bank, if you want, a SoundBank, or media files. So this actually helps by saying, hey, now I actually have all the individual files are being sent directly inside the event themselves. And all the shared assets are sent to the Wise shared asset library. If you don't add this, what will happen is those assets will revert back to the old system because there's no way we will copy 1 gigabyte files for every single asset just for fun. So if you don't have that, it will simply revert back. And that's all right. Both systems can coexist at all time. Now the fun part about this is an array. So this is the first step of the array. This is the failsafe. The failsafe is saying we have a shared asset library and we actually want to have all the shared asset in there. And this is a typical Wise asset. So if I go in here to Wise Audio, my screen is so tiny right now. Wise shared asset library, it's there. It's a U asset like every single one of them. So you can chunk it, you can cook it, you can do whatever you want. It's an asset. And the proof, if I go back in here to Wise Audio, the Wise shared asset library is actually here. Now you see it's in a U bulk. The reason for this, there's multiple, there's U asset, U bulk, UXP, and optional UPTNL. That's so unreal. The U bulk is to say these are streamed. So when you load the Wise shared asset library, it will not load every single asset in memory. That gigabyte worth of asset, we will just load the pointer saying, by the way, it's on the disk at that place. And whenever an event actually needs that file, it will go get it there. So
Nice.
it's a little bit slower than actually having it directly inside the event, but a tiny little bit, because the pointer is already there, the file is already open, everything is already done. So the only thing the system has to do is say, please give me that file, and it will do it. So if I go back here, what can we do more? We can create a new one. Let's say that we want to separate languages because you want to chunk your languages in different chunks and load them on demand. For example, your game is huge, it's already gigabytes and gigabytes, and you want to actually load them on demand as a DLC from someplace else. So let's start by creating a new Wwise shared asset library. I'll put this in Wwise Audio because why not? And now my HUD is on me again. The name will be language English. Save. I have the language English here. Now it doesn't have any filter. So what does it do? It contains every single thing. We need to put a filter. If you don't put a filter, you have everything. So you better put a filter in there. Let's filter for a specific language.
Nice.
Then we go in here. We have the list of languages. You can have no language, SFX. It's still valid. And let's say I want to have English of both types in my asset. So now I have the filter. Now you see you have play localized switch, play localized voice, ENGB in US. So you have SoundBanks and you have media. And you have multiple languages also. And these are the files that are being packaged. So those language will be packaged in here first. They will be removed. Let me rephrase that. They will be removed from your event. They won't be inside your U asset for the event. They will be dragged, willingly or not, inside that Wwise asset library. So at this point, we've just split the language for English. I'll save this.
And that removes it from the shared library.
On top of it, yes, because this one has precedence over that one. So
Great.
if anything was in a different language, this one has precedence. So let's go one level higher. Yet again, let's create a new one. Let's do this and create language French. Because, hey, it happens that our game has both. I'll create a new one.
Add that filter.
Add that filter. You need to put a filter because it will not be fun otherwise. And then I have French here. I'll save this. So now I have language French, language English. Because of the order, if any of the files would have been in both, French will prioritize over English because this is what we have in this order. First French, second English, third shared asset library. Let's say we have a DLC. That will be my last example for this. Let's say we have a DLC. DLC for Wwise. Save. Open the DLC. Let's filter this out. So now you have filter by text. These will look at every single asset name here. The SoundBanks, the InetBank, the media files. So you have a list of all the asset names themselves. If you want, you can have a filter by text. This is really useful, especially if you have a very good naming convention with your company and everything starts with DLC something. that is really useful. So let's pretend that we don't have that, because here play DLC sound. That's not what we want. So let's filter by event names instead. Let's go here. By default, we have everything. Let's say I want to have the event play DLC everything. And now in here, if I can drag and drop, of course not, because Unreal, we have play DLC sound and play DLC sound streaming. These are the two different sound banks that are added with this. If I want to add another one, let's say I want to have all the play a something.
Yeah.
In here, now we have play autobank SFX. That's all right. So we can add a few like this, or we could add all the play if we want in there. These are redundant, of course, right now.
Sure.
But you see that the media will be added with them also. So the DLC happen to not have any media, but anything that's inside that event will be added automatically with this. You want something more complex, you can use regex. It's a little bit more complex, but hey, at least you have play something star and you can add multiple one with space. So that's easier like that. And if you want, you can ask for SoundBanks and media or not. So now I just created with this DLC for Wwise US set that will package everything first, then the language in English, then the shared asset library, and whatever will come back at the end will be inside your US set. Meaning that this file, you can chunk it with your DLC and it will contain everything that is required for your DLC to actually run. So that's it for the checkbox itself. So the cool thing, just to recap, you can have this like that. It will work and it will work like before. You can add this with package as bulk data. By default, we create a Wwise shared asset library, and by default, it has the proper filter, by the way. And you can add more libraries if you want, especially for your modular gameplay, for your chunking, for your first chunk if you want, the initial chunk. So you could maybe have all the languages for main menu and say, hey, those, I want to actually have them everywhere. So you can create as many libraries as you want that you can reorder as usual, because Unreal allows you to do that. We are not doing anything fancy. And the only thing it changes inside our system is during cooking time. Nothing else has changed. So yeah,
Great.
that's it.
It's great. So again, what started as auto-defined sound banks, now arriving across Unreal and Unity, that granularization of banks and their associated media, you know, making it easy for people to let the game load and unload what it needs, and now expanding into support for addressables and packaging, allowing for that next level of asset management that takes into consideration the when and the where of these assets, so that you can manage them and their distribution as part of your installation. So
exactly. And technically it changes nothing. You don't have anything to do, and technically the DLCs are optional. If you decide not to load the shared asset, the different Wwise asset libraries, then of course your sounds will be not playing correctly. That's your issue at that point. but if it's present on the disk, it will load it automatically.
Great.
As part of that list. So it loads all of them. Everything that it can find will do it.
Yep.
Otherwise, you can just load synchronous because, hey, I just downloaded the DLC. I want to load this. You load it. That's it. Please don't unload them, though. We have not made provisions for them to be unloaded at this point. But you see here, the English and French language took everything that was inside the events here and just moved whatever language individually were there inside those files, and that will be packaged inside your game at your leisure, so you can put it wherever you want at that point. That's the entire deal of this. This one is tiny because you've seen it's only 2 small SoundBanks, so it's like 400 bytes, but it's 2 files less. Now you only have 1, and it will load automatically and magically with this. So yeah, it's also interesting doing these kind of optimization, because if I go back to the history of event-based packaging and before the legacy mode, the Unreal project didn't know anything about the Wwise project itself. If you look back days before, we used something that was called directory to always cook. And you put your generated SoundBanks, and it will put whatever is inside, and that's it. Even if it contains files that will never be used, for example, the XML files, or there's a few text files that you can have, all of those will be cooked alongside everything. The event-based packaging came in, but again, we tried to understand the Wwise project, but could not really do it. It's not easy to understand the Wwise project. So what got created for 22.1 is actually the metadata inside the Wwise project. That is a complete view of what is required to play an event. And that is a complex thing. So we created that for 22.1 in Unreal. Why we didn't have that in Unity before, and why we didn't have the load time part that is now magical. You just do something, you press the button, the checkbox is there or not, and it works in Unity also. So it works everywhere. But why we didn't have that in Unity was because we did not have the Wwise project database. So the Wwise project database inside Unreal is a module that we created that actually contains the logic to understand what's inside your generated SoundBank. So if I go back here, the menu is really tiny. I'm not used to working at that resolution, sincerely. So all the JSON files contain the list of everything that is required to play and understand this project. So if I go to this event and I want to have the ambient event JSON, this contains the list of the SoundBanks that are required, the plugins that needs to be loaded, the list of the events, and if you have audio that needs to be played, for example, Fire Shotgun should have something. So you have the SoundBanks here, you have the media here for the shotgun fire, and you have the event in here. So we know where the file is located, we know how it's called, what's the ID, who uses that. All those JSON, we need to parse them and we need to understand them. And this is the Wwise project database that we added for 24.1 inside a special sample that you can use inside the Wwise SDK. So you don't need Unreal, you don't need Unity. If you have an integration that you made yourself and you want to understand what's inside the generated SoundBanks, the Wwise project database that is available inside the SDK will help you do that. And we migrated that part to the SDK so that Unity could use it.
That's
so
great.
this is why we understand the project. We understand what needs to be packaged. We can pull the database and actually ask what is needed to play the fire shotgun, and the system will tell you. This is what actually helped Unity work for this part.
Yeah, and these are files that are generated as part of the SoundBank generation process from Wwise. So these files originate from Wwise, and now there's this database that has all of the information that a game engine can use in order to make its asset management decisions.
Exactly, and this is what helps us make sure that those files, no matter where they are located and no matter what we are doing, here we have the user-defined bank. It contains a SoundBank that is user-defined, that has plugin, that has events, that has no media, but it could have media. There's many things that could be inside that user-defined SoundBank. So you have that file here. That bank file, we know what's in there. And if we generate and we move those files elsewhere, the files will be moved together alongside with whatever event is in there. So if you remove the user-defined SoundBank, it will be located somewhere inside the event folder, and you'll be able to run that same event without any change in your software, because we know where it's located and we know what we need to load, what we need to process, handle, unload, which plugins are required, if any. So we know all of that, so we can actually do the good decision. This is what we call crystal ball inside the Wwise project.
Awesome. It's fantastic. And again, I think, as you said, fundamental to being able to bring this, with parity to Unity, Unreal, and other game engines that are interested in adopting this kind of granularized asset management strategy.
Yeah. And this brings also one question that we've had from many people, and I'm sorry, I will not give you what you want. There's many people that are asking, can we load an event with a string? The problem with that is knowing where we package that event. We don't keep any general database of what is packaged where inside your project once it's cooked. So if you create a final project in shipping, we don't know where the files are because they are all around the place in the UAssets for the events and the Wwise asset library that you created. So we don't know where they are. What is known, though, that file is known. You can create a link to that file. You can, if you have a good naming convention, you have a UAsset here. There's no reason not to use Unreal's tools in order to load fully or partially or everything or all the play footsteps events or only a few ones or whatever through a string inside Unreal. But asking for us to do one step further would ask us to actually have a database like the Wwise project database that is available for the entire game. And that project database was optimized for speed inside the editor. It was not optimized to be packaged. So I don't recommend anyone actually using that system to pull something. If you want, pull it, create your own assets, package it however you want, create a data table in there if you want, and do it the way that you wish. But we cannot actually know where the assets are going to be down the line. They might be even duplicated and we don't know which one are available. So for us, we cannot add back the strings. That ship has sailed, and I'm sorry about that.
It just means that folks will have to find a new way around to it. And you made some suggestions there along the way of how people could link these things on their own, if that is a methodology they want to continue to explore. And so,
yep.
Let us know how it goes out there, folks. Again, we're iterating swiftly forward, and as Michel has said, we'll continue to move forward with your best interests in mind. So,
yep,
doing what we can here. And
exactly.
So we got Guido watching. Hi, Guido. Good to see you. He's super stoked and says thanks for showing integrations and improvements. He's carrying a question forward. Is there a plan to have an official Godot integration? He's referencing the one that Alessandro Fama has helped create that is robust and great, but he's wondering if there's any news. I'm going to jump on this one right out of the gate and say that, Alessandro is now working for us at Audiokinetic in our European office as a field engineer. So great to have Alessandro on the team. I got to hang out with him last month in Europe. And we don't have any plans to make that integration official at the moment, but having Alessandro on the team means that we're in close communication as things continue to move forward with the community-supported Wwise Godot integration. So that's
I have one suggestion for this. If you plan on creating a commercial game that uses Godot, first, the integration that's there is already really good. I mean, seriously, it's already good. Give us a reason for us to actually take the Godot integration and bring it on board. You've seen the quantity of code that we need to create. We test things, we have tester, we have QAs. we need to package all of that. We need to handle it. There's a major difference between having a project that is a sideline and an official project that we support. If we have commercially viable project that actually ask for Godot, ask our representative, ask Damien, ask Mike.
Yeah,
we need that.
Yeah, so keep us posted on how you're using Godot out there in the community. Let us know how it's going. And there's something there that you touched on, Michel, that I think is interesting to pull on a bit, and that is the amount of code that goes into our integrations and what people can do with that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what people have access to, ways they can extend the integrations that we provide officially? So
since 22.1, if you look back at the project, and this is the history part, sorry, I'm a history freak. If you look historically, the integrations for Unreal and Unity used to be examples. It used to be a piece of code that will do most of the work for you, basically, and simply take the Wwise SDK interface and apply them to Unity or Unreal. That changed eventually when we started to have more component, more stuff, and we used to have AK Audio and Audiokinetic tools. Those were the two modules that we used to have. Now, if you look at 24.1, you have a lot more modules, and you even have more than one plugin. We have multiple plugins. For example, why is Niagara? Why is it in a plugin? Because Niagara is optional. You might not have it in your project. So we don't want to have Niagara there by default if you're not going to use it. Same this year for 24.1, the Wwise Sound Engine is its own plugin. You can have the Wwise Sound Engine by itself and have none of our code. You are responsible for every single thing, but you have access to all the functions through the Wwise Sound Engine. And this is a main change in mentality that we have for this. You can take the sound engine by itself and have nothing else from our code, or take inspiration, creative inspiration. We all know what this means for coders in our code, and look at what you like, what you don't like, change anything. In AK Audio, the way to change things was to open the file and actually change whatever you wanted. And this is still true. Audiokinetic tools, AK Audio, these are two different projects that are monolithic, that are self-contained and will not change. And that's a shame right now. But if you've looked how we worked for the different packages and the modules that we have, all those modules are there, and every single one of them is modifiable by the end user. So let's say that you want to load the resources differently. You can load the resources differently by modifying an ini file. How do you do that? So let's say I have here my Wwise resource loader. So I have the Wwise resource loader module. You will see the boilerplate code here. It's pretty much identical between the different modules. And you will see below there's something called Wwise resource loader module name. What is that? So let's close UE5 because I'm running as a plugin right now inside the engine. So it's an engine plugin. Someone has to do it. If I go to the different, here you have the different logs, you have multiple elements that you can actually have. And in here in the audio part, you have the Wwise file handler module has been updated to something else. Let's say that I want to change it to something else. I want the resource loader to actually load something else. I will create my own resource loader. You create that module, you put it inside your project. Every time we ask for the resource loader, it will load this. But can you do something with this? Sorry, it's not there. It's here. So let's go here, the resource loader. Every single file inside the resource loader has thing as public for most things, protected for most thing, and are exported for about everything else. Even the implementation itself, everything is virtual, most is protected. There might be a few things that are private, but these are really rare. And if we forgot to actually send something, tell us, we will do it. But all the files that we believe, all the functions that we believe can be updated and you have a value to update them are virtual. You can change whatever you want without changing a single line of code from our part. And all the source code, of course, because we are in Unreal and Unity has the same thing, everything is accessible. All the source files are accessible. So yeah, you can actually read our stuff, modify our stuff, have your own implementation. In fact, that's the way we are working for external sources right now. We don't have a default implementation for external sources. We do have a simple external source that will have tables, but that's our version. And to be honest, we need to upgrade that because it's been a few years and we need to change a few things here. But sincerely, you can change all pieces of code everywhere.
Great. And so like resource loading is one example. What happens when a game object is, awake or destroy, managing those
obstruction
aspects.
and occlusion. You want to change, you want to have your own system for obstruction or occlusion. You can have that. The Wwise packaging part where you have the bulk data, everything is inside their own modules. Every single thing is modifiable and updatable by you, the user, whenever you want, except for AK Audio and Audiokinetic tools, because we are slowly migrating everything while keeping compatibility. And that's great, but that's not great for us. It's a lot of work.
But it's worth it for what you're unlocking on the other side for developers, and
yes.
It's a great effort to move towards that kind of flexibility for folks who, they want to get going right away. They want to get integrated and get up and running. But as you're developing, you know that things change and you have different needs that emerge. So having access to the code and that flexibility just means that you can grow alongside your game with Wwise in the direction of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and we are using most of the feature of Wwise. So we are a good example on how to do things also. So if you are creating your own integration, first, good luck. But second part, you have a good example. You want to create your own IO hook. This is how we are creating the IO hook, and we are trying to add logs and errors and have the code relatively easy to read. Relatively is a very large word here. We still want to be efficient in the way we are working. So you have access to our code, so you can see how we are doing this.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for stepping us through that. Fun to see the code for someone like myself who's not a programmer, just the directness of what's there, what a developer has access to, and what you can change in order to suit your game is, it's a pleasure. Thanks for driving us through that.
Hey, my pleasure.
Cool. All right. So where are we at? Did we do it? All the things?
I believe so.
I like the sound of that. I'm jumping back in here for a second to say, here we are. We're on the third beta. So please get out there and check it out. We're doing some fun stuff like what we've been talking about here with Hugo and Michel. You can install that through the Audiokinetic launcher available at audiokinetic.com. This is a great way to get your hands on what we're working on. That beta 3 is dropping this afternoon, so queue up, get some popcorn, get that installed. As always, bring that feedback to us. Take the survey that's there in the launcher, report bugs, drop by the Audiokinetic community Q&A, contact support if you're working with an integration or working with a game and you're trying it out on the side. Raise your hand and let us know how it's going. However you carry this feedback to us, please keep carrying it, because it's things like the scaling distance percentage effective max distance field that we carried to the beta 2. It's things like the favorites category filter in the new property editor that's arriving in beta 3 that are a direct result of the conversations and the feedback that we're having with you around this public beta. So please continue to bring that feedback. We never tire of hearing from you and your experience out there using Wwise in your projects. So with that, jump in, bring it. And thanks so much today for joining us. Michel, Hugo, great to have your overview and deep dive into these new features for 24.1.
Hey, it's really fun. We should do this more often, actually. If there's more questions, if there's deep dives that are requested, we should do that more often.
Yeah, we'll keep doing it. How's that?
Yes.
It's not your first time on the live stream. Hugo will have you back anytime. And yeah, let's keep finding reasons to touch base with the community about our Wwise integrations and keep moving forward together. So
thank you, Damien.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time, this was Wwise Up on Air, hands on. Thanks a lot.